What if I told you that while the entire retail crypto audience has spent the last several months arguing about price targets and dismissing the thesis as broken, the gap between institutional behavior and retail perception around XRP has widened to the largest spread in the asset's documented history, and that historically, when that gap reaches this scale, the market eventually catches up with violent precision? Strong claim, I know. But before you scroll past this video, ask yourself this brutal question. When does the largest bank in Italy quietly integrate Ripple custody into its digital asset strategy and almost nobody outside professional analyst circles even notices? When does real-world asset tokenization on the XRP ledger grow by more than 120% in a single month, while retail is convinced the network is dormant? When does a private market technology index begin placing Ripple alongside OpenAI, SpaceX, Stripe, and Anthropic, and the implications of that placement get reduced in retail commentary to a passing mention? Because every one of those events is happening right now. Each one is documented, each one is verifiable, and the cumulative pattern they form is structurally incompatible with the bearish narrative dominating social media. While the crowd is watching the chart and concluding the thesis has stalled, something far more durable is being assembled behind the curtain. Today, I'm going to walk you through the multi-front institutional integration that is happening simultaneously across banking, tokenization, custody, regulation, and payment rails, and why this convergence is the single most important structural signal of the entire cycle. And the world, once again, is missing the signal. Welcome back. On this channel, we don't trade hype, we decode structure. Today, we are going under the hood of one of the most underreported convergences in modern financial history: the simultaneous, multi-jurisdictional, multi-vertical integration of Ripple's infrastructure into the operational backbone of global finance. No moonboy fantasies, no emotional charts, just the documented developments, the institutional behavior patterns, and the positioning that retail has been trained to ignore. Before we go under the surface, this is informational analysis, not financial advice. Let's jump in. Let's start with the hard truth. 99% of retail investors are still viewing this market through the lens of the previous cycle. They are looking for retail-driven manias, meme-driven euphoria, leverage-fueled vertical rallies, and the kind of speculative theater that defined 2017 and 2021. They are looking for it because that is what they remember. And because they are looking for the wrong pattern, they cannot see the pattern that is actually emerging. The current cycle is not retail-driven, it is institutional-driven. And institutional-driven cycles do not look like retail-driven cycles. They are slower, quieter, more methodical, and they front-load the boring infrastructure phase before producing the obvious, retroactively visible price discovery phase. The speculative era of crypto is transitioning into the infrastructure era. And during that transition, the noise on social media is loudest, precisely because the underlying pattern has shifted in a way the retail framework cannot recognize. Here is what almost nobody on this platform is willing to say clearly. Brad Garlinghouse, speaking at Consensus, said something that the community paid surprisingly little attention to, but that reveals the actual strategic posture of the company most aligned with this asset. He acknowledged that 7 years ago, central bankers treated the word crypto as toxic. Today, some of those same central bankers are actively exploring blockchain-based settlement systems. That is not a narrative pivot. That is a measured professional observation about how institutional sentiment moves. Slowly through stages of disbelief, then quiet experimentation, then infrastructure development, then adoption, and finally large-scale capital deployment. The market we are in right now is sitting at the collision point between infrastructure development and capital allocation. Most investors are not psychologically prepared for that transition because it does not feel like the previous transitions they have lived through. David Schwartz has, in different language, framed the same observation from the technical side. This is not coincidence, this is convergence, and once you see the convergence, you cannot unsee it. Now let me address something that Garlinghouse said at the same event that was actually extremely mature, and that the community has not properly processed. He cautioned against tribalism in crypto. He observed that the future is unlikely to be a single-chain world, and that the global financial system has never operated through a single rail anyway. Read that carefully. There is no single bank that handles all global finance. There is no single payment network that powers every transaction. There is no single exchange that controls all liquidity. Financial systems evolve through interoperability, specialization, and layered infrastructure. Blockchain will almost certainly evolve the same way. Different networks will specialize in different functions: payments, tokenization, decentralized finance, identity, settlement. The right question is not which chain wins all of crypto, because nothing in financial history has ever worked that way. The right question is which chain is being structurally embedded into specific institutional functions right now, today, with documented integrations and named counterparties. And on that specific question, the evidence around Ripple is structurally distinct from almost any other competitor. Let's do the math, the kind retail desperately wants to ignore. The institutional development pipeline around Ripple and XRP, when you actually tally it honestly, is unlike anything in the broader crypto ecosystem. Approximately 850 million XRP is currently locked in long-term custody and ETF custodial structures. Exchange flow data resembles the accumulation patterns documented before previous major price movements. Real-world asset tokenization on the XRP ledger has surged more than 120% in a single 30-day window. The XRP ledger now represents roughly 3.3% of global tokenized value on chain, and that share is growing, not shrinking, as Ethereum's previously dominant position erodes month over month. Now layer the supply side. XRP has a hard cap of 100 billion tokens. Roughly 40 billion remain in escrow under transparent on-chain release rules. 5 to 7 billion are estimated permanently lost. Approximately 800 million XRP are now locked in ETF custodial structures. SBI Holdings has issued instruments redeemable in XRP. Evernorth Holdings holds hundreds of millions of XRP as treasury reserves. Strategic reserves, partner allocations, market maker inventory, and long-term institutional holders absorb tens of billions more. The actual freely tradable float is far, far smaller than the headline number suggests. Now layer the demand picture. The global cross-border payments market processes roughly $150 trillion every single year. The foreign exchange market alone moves $7.5 trillion every single day. The Bank for International Settlements documents approximately $27 trillion sitting idle in Nostro and Vostro accounts. The derivatives market sits at an estimated $1.2 quadrillion in notional value. And on top of all of that, the global real-world asset tokenization market, equities, bonds, real estate, commodities, invoices, treasury products, represents potentially hundreds of trillions of dollars of assets that may eventually migrate to blockchain rails over the coming decade. Even a small percentage migration of that scale creates structurally enormous demand for the settlement and bridge infrastructure that absorbs the flow. This isn't a prediction, it is a requirement of the design. If you have a problem with these numbers, you don't have a problem with me. You have a problem with the math of global financial modernization. Now let me walk you through the multi-front integration that is actively happening, because the documented evidence here is genuinely difficult to dispute. Front 1, institutional ETF demand. The CEO of Bitwise recently noted that hundreds of millions of dollars continue flowing into crypto investment products even during weak market conditions. That is the exact opposite of how retail behaves. Retail buys strength and sells weakness. Institutions buy weakness and accumulate during uncertainty. The persistence of those institutional inflows during a difficult sentiment environment is the single most reliable indicator that conviction at the allocator level remains intact. ETF infrastructure changes the accessibility profile of an asset completely. For years, compliance restrictions, custody concerns, and accounting limitations prevented institutional capital from engaging with crypto directly. ETFs solve those problems. The bridge between traditional capital markets and digital assets is now operational, and the early flow data confirms that capital is moving across it. Front 2, European banking integration. Italy's largest bank has integrated Ripple custody into its broader digital asset strategy. Read that carefully. The largest bank in one of Europe's most institutionally conservative financial markets is operationally using Ripple infrastructure. Retail often glances past announcements like this because they don't generate immediate price action. But custody is the absolute foundation of institutional finance. Before trillions of dollars can move on-chain, regulated custody frameworks must exist. Ripple custody provides exactly that. Wallet infrastructure, key management, compliance tooling, tokenization capabilities, and the operational backbone necessary for banks to participate in digital asset markets at scale. Front 3. European tokenization policy. Officials at the Bank of Italy have openly discussed tokenized versions of existing European payment networks. Cross-border settlement remains slow, expensive, and heavily intermediated under the legacy correspondent banking system. Trillions of dollars are trapped globally in pre-funded liquidity accounts simply to maintain functional cross-border payments. Ripple identified this inefficiency more than a decade ago, and now the institutions themselves are publicly acknowledging it. This is not retail discovery of an opportunity. This is institutional acknowledgement of a problem they need to solve. Front 4, payment integration. The TrustLink integration with Ripple payments now enables direct crypto to fiat settlement across more than 170 countries and over 80 currencies. That is not theory. That is deployed infrastructure. Casey Crook from Ripple has explained the underlying mechanic clearly. Approximately $3 trillion globally sits parked in pre-funded payment accounts simply to maintain cross-border functionality. XRP's role as a bridge asset capable of sourcing liquidity on demand fundamentally changes that architecture. The capital efficiency unlock alone, not the speed, not even the cost reduction, but the capital efficiency, is what makes this an economic revolution rather than a technological upgrade. When trillions of dollars no longer need to sit idle globally, that capital can be redeployed productively elsewhere throughout the financial system. That is the macroeconomic unlock institutions actually care about. Front 5, index recognition. Ripple now ranks alongside OpenAI, SpaceX, Stripe, and Anthropic within major private market unicorn indexes. Read that lineup again. OpenAI defines the frontier of artificial intelligence. SpaceX defines the frontier of space-based commerce. Stripe defines the frontier of digital payments. Anthropic defines the frontier of safety-aligned AI. Ripple is the only blockchain-based financial infrastructure company consistently appearing in that company. That positioning is not random. It reflects how the institutional capital that allocates to those private indexes views Ripple internally, as infrastructure, not as speculation. And infrastructure companies, once embedded, generate the most durable compounding network effects in the history of financial markets. Visa, MasterCard, Swift, all became infrastructure first and value accruing systems second. The same pattern is documented to be repeating with Ripple on a multi-year arc. While retail is panic selling and arguing about minute charts, the institutional signal has never been louder. Ask yourself this brutal question. Does a firm with the legal exposure of Ripple, after years of litigation against the SEC, secure operational approvals in the UK, the European Union, the UAE, Singapore, Japan, Australia, and other major jurisdictions while being one of the only crypto firms consistently approved in markets where the majority of crypto applicants are rejected unless the institutional integration is structurally real? Absolutely not. They don't gamble. They position. And the people who really matter, the silent actors, are positioning right alongside them. Look at the broader chessboard. Larry Fink at BlackRock has gone from publicly dismissing crypto to championing tokenization as the future of every financial asset on Earth. The Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation is actively piloting tokenized settlement mechanisms. The New York Stock Exchange is exploring blockchain infrastructure. NASDAQ is discussing digital asset frameworks. Franklin Templeton, Fidelity, JP Morgan, MasterCard, every apex institution in traditional finance is publicly engaging with blockchain settlement. The Bank of England has openly discussed digital cash interoperability. The Bank of Japan continues to publish CBDC research that explicitly discusses interoperability layers. The European Central Bank publishes interoperability work on a near-monthly cadence. The IMF has openly discussed the need for a more efficient cross-border architecture. This is not retail FOMO. This is the simultaneous, coordinated, multi-jurisdictional modernization of global finance. The retail crowd is staring at price. The institutions are staring at integration timelines. One of them is going to be very, very right. The other is going to be writing comments on YouTube about how they were lied to. So when does this collide with the visible market? Pay attention here, because the catalysts are no longer theoretical. The Clarity Act and broader market structure legislation moving through the United States Congress represent the immediate near-term regulatory catalyst. The Senate Banking Committee markup is scheduled. The legislative path from markup to floor vote to House reconciliation to presidential signature targets the early summer window in the realistic scenario. Once a clear classification framework is locked in, the risk premium that has held back trillions of dollars in compliance-bound capital evaporates overnight. That is the near-term trigger. But, and this is the crucial discipline, the Clarity Act is not the entire thesis. The Multifront integration we just walked through continues regardless of the bill's specific outcome. The Italian banking custody integration does not pause based on US legislation. The European tokenization conversations do not stop. The TrustLink integration continues. The ETF accumulation persists. The Bank of Japan, the Japanese FSA, the European Central Bank, MyCA in Europe, all of these regulatory and integration developments are happening in parallel across jurisdictions. The US Clarity Act would accelerate the timeline. It is not the only path forward. Then there is the macro layer. The Federal Reserve continues to evolve its posture. A Fed chair transition is approaching that by every credible candidate's documented record points toward a more accommodative stance on payment system modernization. Global debt levels are forcing every major central bank to consider new settlement architectures. Layer on top of that the rise of AI agents requiring instant programmatic settlement. AI agents executing deterministic payment logic at scale need ledgers with 3 to 5 second finality and near zero transaction cost. The XRPL is positioned exactly for that workload. The fuse is already lit. There are multiple fuses, they are lit in parallel. Now, let me talk about the tokenization scale because retail vastly underestimates what is actually being engineered here. Total tokenized real world asset value globally has now surpassed $30 billion. The XRP ledger's share of that has grown explosively in a compressed time frame. But here's the structural insight: $30 billion in tokenized real world assets is the early end of a curve that could reach into the hundreds of trillions over the next decade if the migration of equities, bonds, real estate, commodities, and other traditional financial assets onto blockchain rails continues. Even a small percentage of that long-term scale represents an enormous tailwind for the infrastructure layer that absorbs the flow. The XRP ledger's specific positioning around payments, liquidity, compliance, and institutional partnerships is the documented competitive advantage that may determine how much of that flow it captures. Ethereum dominates today. That dominance is already eroding. The competition for institutional tokenization market share will intensify across multiple specialized blockchains. The networks that have spent years building enterprise relationships, regulatory positioning, and operational infrastructure, networks like the XRPL, are structurally positioned to absorb meaningful share. Now let's talk about the side of the equation most people refuse to confront: supply drain. While the demand side is being assembled simultaneously across banking, tokenization, payments, custody, regulation, and ETF infrastructure, the supply side is being quietly removed from the open market. Exchange reserves of XRP have been trending lower for an extended period. CryptoQuant data, Glassnode analytics, on-chain forensic researchers, every credible source confirms the same trend. Tokens are leaving exchanges and entering custody. Once a token enters a multi-signature institutional vault or an ETF custodian's reserves, it does not come back to market for a 10% profit. It is gone. It is parked. It is reserved for the new system. We are moving from an era of abundance to an era of scarcity, and retail has not priced this in. Think about what that means in practical terms. When the regulatory switch is flipped, when the European tokenized payment systems go live, when the Italian banking custody integration becomes operational at scale, when the institutional gates open across all the fronts simultaneously, the available float on exchanges will be a fraction of what it appears to be on paper today. Order books will be thin, buy walls will be hollow, and the price discovery process will not be gradual, it will be violent. The XRP Rich List, the public on-chain wallet ranking, already shows wallets in the shark tier, those holding between 100,000 and 1 million XRP, growing in number through every recent down cycle. Long-term holding wallets sit at all-time highs. The supply transfer from impatient hands into patient institutional custody is not a future event. It is happening right now in real time on the public ledger. New buyers will not be buying whole XRP eventually. They will be buying drops. 1 XRP equals 1 million drops, and over time, drops will be the only unit late retail can afford to accumulate. There is a phrase you will start hearing more often: the great priced out. The window is closing, not in years, in quarters. The institutions have spent half a decade trying to shake you out so they can take your position. Don't make their job easy. I know exactly what you're feeling right now. You're watching red candles. You're seeing influencers pivot to whatever shiny narrative is trending this week. You're seeing tribal arguments dominate social media when serious analysts like Garlinghouse are publicly warning against tribalism, and the temptation to give up, to dismiss the multi-front integration as too slow, too quiet, too distributed across too many jurisdictions to translate into a tradable thesis, has never been louder. I understand that. But my job is to help you distinguish between noise and signal. The price action is noise. The chain versus chain tribalism is noise. The compressed timeline predictions are noise. The signal is the simultaneous, documented, multi-front institutional integration happening across banking, custody, tokenization, payments, regulation, and ETF infrastructure. None of that stopped because the price went sideways. It accelerated quietly in parallel across multiple jurisdictions. Being early feels exactly like being wrong, right up until the moment reality catches up. That is the cruelest psychological trap in this entire industry, and the institutions know it. They are counting on it. They need a steady stream of exit liquidity from the confused to fund the entry of the informed. Markets reward anticipation, not confirmation. The infrastructure adoption pattern from the internet era is the historical template here. The internet bubble crashed in 2000. The internet went on to transform civilization. The people who panicked at extreme prices, sold at extreme bottoms, and declared the thesis dead missed the entire transformation that followed. The people who understood that infrastructure adoption unfolds slowly before it accelerates, that financial systems modernize gradually until they suddenly move all at once, became the next decade's winners. We are sitting at exactly that kind of inflection. The combination of the European banking integration, the tokenization growth on the XRPL, the multi-jurisdictional regulatory approvals, the elite private index recognition, the ETF flow persistence, the supply contraction, the macro liquidity environment that is approaching, the AI-driven settlement demand category, and the legislative catalysts queued in Washington, all of this is converging in the same multi-year window. This is not a single catalyst. This is a structural transformation operating across multiple simultaneous fronts. The XRP thesis has never had this many simultaneously aligned variables, not at any prior point in this asset's history. If you've made it this far in the video, you are not the confused. You are the informed. Hold that line. Let me leave you with this. Price action is a distraction. The infrastructure compounding is the reality. One is a snapshot. The other is the simultaneous multi-jurisdictional, multi-vertical embedding of a settlement protocol into the operational backbone of global finance. The question is, are you watching the chart or are you watching the integration map? History does not reward comfort. It rewards those who pay attention when the room is quiet. And right now, the room is very, very quiet. Exactly the way the silent actors building the next system need it to be while they finalize their positioning across every jurisdiction simultaneously. If you made it to the end of this analysis, drop the word infrastructure in the comments. I want to see who actually understood what was decoded today. If you value this kind of deep structural breakdown, subscribe and turn on notifications because the catalysts are accelerating across every front simultaneously. The math doesn't lie, and the system is almost complete. Stay patient, stay rational. And as we always do, we don't wait for the future, we plan for it. This content is for informational and educational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research before making any investment decision.